Hey there, everyone. I'm Raymond Lee, the host of Clocking Out. This podcast, it was born from a deeply personal place. Like many of you listening, I've experienced those moments where you look at your career and you think to yourself, there has to be more than this. Those crossroads we all experience, they're hard. We tend to stay safe, feeling stuck, then taking that leap of faith. Clocking Out is dedicated to my mom, who showed me what courage really looks like when she took her own leap of faith to pursue career fulfillment. Her journey inspired me to find my own career path and now to create this space where we can explore other people's stories together. My hope here is that our guests might illuminate something in your own path, whether you're contemplating a major change or you're just simply looking for more meaning in your work. Either way, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Haley Pollack to our Clocking Out community. Haley is an educator who left academia after a decade to teach inmates at San Quentin. She taught them English, philosophy, and literature. At an early age, at 37, Haley was diagnosed with cancer that ultimately turned her world upside down. At the time, she had two little kids, one of which was just 6 months old. Haley's emotional story is just so inspiring, and the work that she's doing today is helping so many parents who are experiencing a similar situation. Haley is just an amazing human, and I am so grateful to have met her, as well as share her story with you all here today. So without further ado, please enjoy Haley Pollack and her Clocking Out story. Haley, welcome to the podcast. It's nice to see you.
It's so good to see you, Raymond.
Yeah, I am excited about our conversation today. For context, you and I connected a couple of months ago, and I have to say, during our first call, I was so touched by your story. It really was touching. And the thing in reflecting from our call and looking forward to our call here today, I think one of the things that struck me is that while we're on our pathway toward our career, we're working on our career, it's a reminder that life happens.
Oh, yeah,
and
totally.
when we least expect it, it's just like, in some cases, it's just like, boom, okay, life, thank you for that. And you sort of have to, deal with it. And so, I was touched by your story, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with our listeners, because I feel like a lot of what you shared in your journey is very relatable to people. And so really eager to, kind of have our conversation today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah. So Haley, what I like to do is start with the origin story and tell us where you're from and what your parents do for a living.
Great. So I'm from outside of DC, the Maryland suburbs. And growing up, my dad was a pediatric intensivist. So he worked in the intensive care unit at Children's Hospital, and is still kind of continuing to do that work. He's no longer a practicing doctor, but is still doing research in the same field. So he's been really doing it for, 50 years, something like that. So like a long time. And my mom was a geriatric social worker. So they were kind of on the opposite ends of the sort of life cycle spectrum. And yeah, I've been thinking a lot about their careers recently, and just kind of what their work experiences gave me, just like as their kid growing up. And really, I think both of them, in different ways, their work was really about helping people, and like really making an impact on people's lives. And work was really important to both of them. My dad's still working. He's almost pushing 80 and still really, his career is really important to him. And the impact of the work, I think, remains so key and important to both his identity, but also I think how he sees himself in the world. And so I think that's been like a really important lesson for me in terms of how I want to be in my work. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I love that your dad's focus is pediatrics, your mom's focus is geriatrics. I have to ask, how did they meet?
They actually met on a blind date. Yeah.
My guess was going to be medical school, but
Oh no. My mom was a social worker, and she actually had a PhD in social work. So it was also like there was a lot of focus on education between a medical doctor and my mom went back to social work school actually when I was little. I think I was a toddler, and so that was another lesson for me for sure is the importance of education in our lives, and also kind of like lifelong learning. I mean, she wasn't so old, but still kind of choosing to go back when her kids were still so little.
So what was home life like growing up outside of DC? Did you have siblings?
Yeah, and I have an older brother. He is also a doctor, and I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but he's actually an oncologist, and cancer has touched our family in so many different ways. But my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 16 and passed away when I was 25. But that was, obviously like a before and after in all of our lives. So, so that was a big part of our home life, at least in my kind of, I don't know, not quite young adulthood, but my older adolescence.
So when you think about some of the memorable moments growing up, it seems like, as a teenager, your mom's diagnosis was such an impact on the family that it sort of gave you the first dose of life and sort of like how that impacts your family and your loved ones and really put you in that position of like supporting and really being there for her during such a tough time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would not have been able to articulate this as a teenager. I wasn't the best teenager in the whole world. But I think in retrospect, something like a parent's diagnosis with cancer or a parent having a chronic illness or really, I think any type of kind of break or medical trauma or whatever it might be in a family unit, it makes you kind of have a different understanding whether or not it's like a certain level of empathy that changes or kind of growing up in a certain, calling you to grow up in a certain way emotionally. And that definitely feels true. And I would not have been able to articulate it then because I don't think I was, was not responding in all the best ways. But now looking back, I definitely can see how impactful it was. And I really do feel like it was, one of my first kind of befores and afters, that we all have.
Mm-hmm. So Haley, as a young girl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be like Indiana Jones, I think. That was really I have always really been interested in the past and how things have changed. And that was kind of stayed with me in a certain way. I went on to get a PhD in history, U.S. history, different than not Indiana Jones, but all the same. Definitely that curiosity about what came before us stayed with me, and still is here, even if I'm no longer pursuing that career. But an archaeologist.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what ultimately did you decide to do?
So after college, I pursued a PhD in U.S. history, and I was on an academic path to be a professor for a while. I was kind of in the adjunct rat race, trying to do my research and teach. And I was also trying to like live my life and figure out where I wanted to live and make just like my own big life decisions, which can be really hard when you're trying to be an academic. You really have to follow the job. And I ultimately decided that while I loved teaching and I really loved research, the whole project wasn't getting me out of bed in the morning. And I really wanted to be doing something that was getting me out of bed in the morning. And I wanted to live in a place that I wanted to live. I didn't want to feel like I was following, for me, I didn't want to feel like I was following a job. I wanted to be able to like make my whole life in the best ways that I could. So I decided to ultimately leave that path and I started pursuing college persistence work. So helping first generation college students pursue their university and college dreams. And then that ultimately took me on a different route where I was working kind of at the intersection of criminal justice and education, working inside California jails, helping folks who were incarcerated to pursue their college dreams and help them to use education as a way to help them on their way out of jail into their next phase of their lives.
So Haley, you said something that really struck me, and I want you to comment on this. You referred to the work that you were doing in education as the rat race, and I can only help but say that when someone says rat race, it automatically brings me to the corporate world and the rat race of the corporate world, because it's like I see a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a grind. And I wonder, what was it about the role that you had as a researcher and that sort of made it unfulfilling?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I loved teaching. I loved being in the classroom. I still love that type of interaction between people, both as a student and as a teacher. I find that to be just fun and interesting and a really like dynamic place for me. But it was really feeling like I was chasing something. And I think especially if you're an adjunct, oftentimes you're really low paid. The work isn't reliable. There's not a lot of job security, and you're a little bit chasing a dream, and that felt all just didn't feel satisfying. It felt like for what am I doing here, and I think the other part of my academic life is while I loved the research and the learning and the writing, I think the pressure to publish and it felt like there was just so much pressure, and it was really hard for me to feel like the pressure, like essentially that it felt hard to kind of tally it all up. It didn't feel worth it. You know, it felt like there was so much stress, there was so much pressure. I didn't have job security. I didn't have, I wasn't really living the life I really wanted to live. Even if I was like intellectually stimulated, the rest of my life just felt very on edge. I wanted to have the security. I wanted to have, I wanted to feel more full.
So how long did you do that before you realized that it was
really
time?
Long time. I did it for a really long time.
Yeah, like a decade?
Like a decade, yeah.
Wow.
And I remember the moment that I decided not to do it. I had an article that had gotten to the second reviewer phase in like a pretty well-respected journal, and I felt like so excited about it. And then I got the reviews back for the second phase of editing, and one reviewer was like so nice and so complimentary and was just like, "This is great. I love this. I can't wait for people to read this." And the other person was like, "What is this? This is crazy. Like, I hate this. Like, why'd you let this in?" And that moment of just feeling like these two people having these totally different kind of opinions about my work. And, you know, ultimately the article didn't go through, and it all felt so bad. And I was like, I don't ever want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this bad.
Mm,
Um, and I'm kind of done. Like I've been working really hard and it all just feels like it doesn't actually feed me. It's not,
mm,
I'm not ultimately doing kind of what I want to be doing here.
mm,
And so it was like a really clear, it was definitely like one of those moments where I was just like, it was like a snap. It was like the, all the building of sort of not sure if I was happy, not sure if this is what I wanted to pursue, kind of just like snapped in that moment.
mm.
And it was a really easy decision once, you know, once that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm curious about your transition out of higher education and academia into, where you ended up ultimately pivoting to. Like, describe that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was hard for me to kind of shift that identity initially. And so I think even while I was adjuncting, I was volunteering at San Quentin, where they have a college on the inside the prison at San Quentin.
Mm,
And so at the time, I was teaching a whole bunch of different classes. I was teaching English classes and history classes and writing classes. And it was probably the most life-shifting, impactful work that I had ever done. I My learning curve was like straight up and down every single time I went in. I was learning so much from our students, but it
mm,
was very, very influential for me of just seeing the impact of an education on students who hadn't had access to an
mm.
education before that.
So just to be clear, these are prisoners in San
Hmm.
Quentin who are serving some sentence. And when you
Hmm.
refer to them as students, they're students of within the prison system. And so you're going in, they have class, you're their teacher, and these are individuals who've committed some crime. They were serving some sentence,
Hmm.
and then they're in the class for an hour a day, learning about English and other topics, and you're their teacher.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
That's like for me, that seems like really intimidating. Like that was when you said learning curves. Was there a moment where you were just sort of like intimidated, or it's very different than being in a classroom in a university setting,
Yeah.
where you have these kids coming in, and I just wonder what that was like.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that was intimidating about it. I mean, I think certainly like walking into a prison is intimidating. There's things you can't wear, there's things, you can't bring in. You're wanded, all that kind of stuff is really intimidating. There's a lot of rules, and it can feel like scary to think like you might break a rule. Like all of those things are really intimidating. Um, And the classroom was a really dynamic place that felt my experience of our students and the classroom was not intimidating. It was so dynamic. It was so dynamic. And our students were, I mean, I remember overhearing a conversation with two students who said that they didn't understand. They were reading like some like philosophy and they didn't understand it, so they read it twice more. And I was just like, wow, like that is like a real hunger for learning. And one of the things that's really special about those classrooms is the kind of mutual respect that is fostered between the students and the professors and teachers. So, yeah, I mean, for sure, it was intimidating, and it was definitely a new environment for me to teach in. And there were like a lot of things that I needed to learn uh, kind of adapt to. But at the same time, it was, yeah, it was a very humbling experience.
I would imagine so. And I feel like once you get past, like the scariness of all the things that you
Hmm.
described earlier, and now you're part of this community, of people who are trusting in you, you're trusting in them, I would imagine that it's not only humbling, but it's so fulfilling to see individuals where they recognize the value of an education and they've hit rock bottom and they're making some investment in themselves. And the fact that you get to witness that, I can only imagine comparing that to working in the higher ed world.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I was doing that at the same time as I was kind of deciding to leave my academic path. And it was a really great bridge for me, but it was also definitely one of the things that pushed me to make my ultimate, like that kind of initial career change. Because so I was volunteering doing that teaching, and then I started working for actually like a charter school in San Francisco called Five Keys that works with adult students, so over 17. And I was working inside San Francisco jails, as well as some other jails in California to help high school students that were adult students, so over 17 adult students who were either finishing their high school degrees that were incarcerated or who had been recently released to pursue their college education, either at community college or at other local state colleges. And yeah, and it was really those early experiences at San Quentin that helped me to make that shift.
Mm. Wow. So when you think back, like early on in your life, like as you were in that moment working in these prison cells, like you probably had no idea that that was what you
Yeah.
ultimately like. What did your parents think about that as a career? Did they have were they like, Haley, you crazy? Or like,
Um, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I feel like my that's a really good question. I think that my family was sort of excited for me. I was really passionate about the work, and I remain, even though it's not what I'm doing now, it's like something I truly believe in. I actually had joined the board of the school at San Quentin, which is called Mount Tamalpais College, and it's actually a fully accredited college now. But it was something that I continue to feel just so passionate and really believe in that work. And so I think that even though it might have been a real surprise for my family that I ended up doing that work, I think that they could see both the importance of the work and kind of on its own terms, as well as its importance to me.
right. Haley, how long did you do this for?
So I was
This
doing
work?
this work for like 5 or 6 years. And then the most unexpected thing happened, which was I had my first kid, and then I had my second daughter, and then I returned to work. And about 6 weeks after I returned to work, I started feeling really sick and kind of brushed it away. But eventually I went to the doctor and I was like, and I'm really tired. And, but I had a 6-month-old baby. I had this job was really intense. I was
Mm.
working inside, the jails, and it was a really intense job. And so I could just write off all of the ways I was feeling terrible to all of those things. I was waking up in the night. I was nursing.
Mm.
Had a 3-year-old. And eventually, and so my doctor told me to get to get blood tests, and I did, and it came out that I was just like crazy anemic. Like I got a call in the middle of the night and was like, don't drive a car. It's not safe. We don't know why you're able to walk on 2 feet. Like you're super anemic. You need to come in for a blood transfusion like ASAP.
Wow. How old were you at this time?
I was 37. And so I just returned to work and I went in for the blood transfusion. And they still couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong. And so it was about a month of tests, and pokes and prods. And eventually Eventually, I had a colonoscopy, which I was expecting that was going to say that had like an ulcer or was too stressed or like something like that.
Right.
And it turned out that I had stage 3C colon cancer.
Wow.
So after I got my diagnosis, it was like a very quick process. Within a week, I was getting, major surgery. After I recovered from the surgery, as soon as possible, they started me on chemo. Um, and I was in treatment with chemo for about 7 months. And then, yeah. So that's kind of that was my other really big break in my sort of
Wow.
career journey, was my cancer diagnosis.
And so, first of all, I appreciate you sharing. It's for I've had family members who had cancer and have lived through it, and it's just an incredibly scary time. Especially,
Hmm.
I can't imagine at 37 years old, having to experience that. That's something that happens to people when they're later in their career. And when I think about identity, it's sort of like it must have been hard, like this is part of you. And it's like, wait, I have this identity and I have this career and like what's going on? And the, can I ask, like, how did you work through that emotionally?
Yeah. I mean, like there's so many identity shifts in that time in your life anyway. Like for me, so much of my identity was also being like a new mom,
Mm,
and being like a working mom. Like I was working really
right.
hard and I had this job that I honestly really loved and felt really proud of the work that we were doing, and really enjoyed my colleagues and, all of that. And I had these two little kids. It was a lot. And when I was first diagnosed, I had like just gotten back to work. Like I actually didn't have any like FMLA left. I didn't have any time off because I had used all of it because I had just had a baby.
This is your second
Um,
baby, the second
yeah,
baby. And how old were they at the time? Obviously, you had a new baby, and the other was probably 2 or 3 years old.
yeah. So I had a 6 month old and a 3 year old.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, the identity shift from like, I don't know, like productive member of society, parent, to cancer patient is a lot. And I think it is especially a lot for a young person. Um, all of my friends, while I was kind of taking this huge pause in my life, my friends were getting promoted. They were, their kids were getting older and they were there, able to like lift them up and just like do all these things. And I was very present during my cancer treatment, but all the same, there was definitely a major pause in my life that it was hard to see my peers continue on, without that same struggle that I
Mm,
was kind of navigating. And I was working. I decided to continue to work during my treatment, which was really the right decision for me. It was good for me to have an outlet that wasn't my kids and wasn't the cancer.
mm-hmm.
That was really important. But all the same, I wasn't able to do what I was doing before. I had made a decision to not go into the jails because my immune system was compromised. And so it was hard to be in my work, not doing what I was doing before, having team members that I was managing that were going in and I wasn't going in. It was complicated and it was hard. And that was also right before the pandemic. So people weren't wearing like masks. And now, maybe I would have worn a mask and still gone in. I don't know. But like that wasn't just a part of I don't know, kind of just the way that the world
Right.
is.
It wasn't considered normal, like at the
Yeah,
time.
it would have
Like
been really weird.
people like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Whereas now it's
exactly.
kind of like I was at the airport the other day, and
Mm.
still lots of people are walking around
Yeah.
with masks because they don't want to catch anything. But it sounds like you were trying to normalize things the best way possible.
Yeah.
and kind of managing through dealing with the cancer and working through the treatments, but having as much of a normal life that you could have where you felt like, you know, it's you were leading with a positive attitude, trying to be optimistic. So what ultimately, like, how did that process work out?
So I was very lucky to, I had a lot of help. Just, the most supportive husband, and my dad came in for a long time, and I have a lot of family locally, and friends came in to help, and all of those things that were really key to, I think, just recovering and getting better slowly, and everything like that. But one of the things that was really really hard during the experience was having a baby and having a 3-year-old and not really knowing how to support them through the process. And as I
Hmm.
was saying before, one of my primary identities was as a parent. And there just wasn't the support that I needed. My social worker, when I was like, and what do I say to my 3-year-old? My social worker was like, that's hard. I was like, I know. Like,
Right.
so what do I say? And they were like,
I need your help.
yeah, that's your job, right? And like, and they gave me so much other support, of course, but there was just this huge gap for me as a young parent specifically. I was nursing at the time of my diagnosis, and I had to wean my baby, and I went to the internet to like find out what I should do, and there was nothing there. It was all very shame based. It was all like, like, why are you weaning? And I was like, so I have cancer. I'm so
Right.
sad about it.
Right.
And there just wasn't the support that I really needed, to both for myself as a parent, but also the help that I needed to shepherd my kids through the experience. And I was also getting like a bunch of like information that was incorrect, like, oh, your kids won't remember it, or just like don't say anything because like they're not going to remember it. But whether or not they remember it or not, my 3-year-old was seeing changes to her routine. Her grandparents were over. I was crying a lot because like I had a really serious diagnosis. So whether or not, those memories are, she can recall those memories, that was an emotional experience for her that needed to be, worked through.
Yeah.
And similarly, my baby was having huge changes to her routine, right? Like I had to stop nursing, new people were taking care of her. I wasn't able to get up in the night with her. Like all these changes were happening. And so the advice of like they're just not going to remember it is not helpful. It's flippant, and it can feel dismissive when you're really in the midst of a crisis. And
Hmm.
so the internet was a place that actually really failed me. I like went to the internet as we do to like find the answers that I was seeking. Like, what do I say to my 3-year-old about my cancer? And everything was pitched to like older elementary school kids or teenagers, which is obviously really important, but that didn't speak to my experience. Or it was kind of outdated information, like, they're not going to remember.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I can only imagine that the lack of support that you were experiencing at that time sort of fueled the ideas that you had in terms of what's the next impact that you can make on the world. And so I'm seeing the connection. So in listening to sort of how you kept coming up short with getting the support, is there advice that you can share to people who may be in a similar situation? I don't know if there's like, what did you ultimately end up doing? And I guess maybe that's the next thing, but I'm just curious, for people who are in that situation where there's all this stuff that's happening, like where did you go to find the support that you needed? And ultimately, what did you end up doing?
I mean, in terms of finding the support that I needed, I honestly wasn't able to find it. And that's kind of the second part of my story.
Mm,
I think in terms of talking to my kids, I feel like and I don't know why it happened. It's not because I'm the best parent in the whole world, but I do think that in the end I had the right instincts that my 3-year-old needed me to talk to her. And so, we were able to pull on family support and pull on resources from family members to kind of help us to think through, what does a 3-year-old need to know? Obviously, something different than what a 13-year-old needs to know, right? But like figuring out like, how do we tell this 3-year-old about something that we have so much baggage, right? Like she doesn't have any baggage about cancer. Like she's 3,
Mhm.
like I'm the one with the baggage about
Mm.
cancer. And so really thinking through, well, what does she need to know? And what's the information that's going to help her? Um, and she's so curious. So like making sure that we are able to answer her questions now and be able to create an environment and a space that she can feel like she can ask questions later
Mm.
too. And so those were really like the, I don't know, the driving kind of like principles for us.
Mm.
But in terms of my experience with my support, it really wasn't until a nutritionist at my cancer center connected me with another young mom who had been diagnosed with breast cancer when she was pregnant and also had a preschooler. So our kids were about the same age, that we connected. And, we became fast friends. And so much of what we ended up talking about were like, how do you kind of walk your kids through this experience and how do you support yourself through this experience? So a lot of that was thinking about work and relationships and friendships, as well as being, a parent and thinking through like the experience of being, a new parent and a new patient, and how do you kind of marry those things by necessity.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I can only imagine, walking with someone who's in a similar situation, having that person beyond the family and the friends that were there to love and support you, but having someone who was actually going through it. I can only imagine that that was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it was enormously helpful. And I do think, you know, I also feel really lucky that Amy, my friend, that part of what was so special about that friendship is I think that, as like when you're pregnant, a lot of times people connect you to other people that are pregnant, and you're like,
Hmm.
all you have in common is that you both are pregnant, and it's not a really fruitful friendship. But with Amy, it was like a certain magic that like we were able to become fast friends because we had so many things in common. And that was, I feel so grateful for that friendship now, but especially thinking back to, that, new cancer patient, and how lucky I was to have that friendship. And so Amy and I, together we sort of came up with Bright Spot Network, which is now what I do. And
Mm.
so we're a nonprofit that supports young families that are navigating a parent's cancer diagnosis while raising young kids. And it was really an organization that was born out of our friendship, knowing that like our peer support was helpful to one another, and recognizing together that there weren't the supports that we needed for us to help, walk our kids through the experience of our diagnoses.
Mm. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about how that spark happened, because I've spoken to lots of people where they meet someone serendipitously,
Hmm.
and in those two connections, and oftentimes sometimes very random, ultimately lead to two co-founders launching something, whether it's a
Hmm.
nonprofit or a company or whatever the case may be. And I'm curious, was it something that just came up, and how did the idea come up, and how did you ultimately pick the name?
So, in terms of how the idea came up, I mean, it was so much what, Amy and I connected about. And a lot of what we connected about was like, wait a second. So there's nothing, there's like literally like you weren't able to find anything. I wasn't able to find anything. There was nothing, it was like a lot of just like this kind
Mm.
of like, I know I'm not, it feels like I'm the only one, but I know I'm not the only one, and kind of being like a little shocked that there wasn't information out there for
Right.
us, essentially. And so
Mm.
I think that between that and both, I mean, honestly, like work being really important to both Amy and I in our own individual careers. So we were kind of always like, would you want to do this? I don't know, sort of like always kind of like bouncing it around. Like there's a space for this. And then, we always talk about our origin story being like we were having tacos and we were like, let's do this,
I love
And
it.
at the time, Amy was a little farther along in her treatment, but just had decided to kind of take a break from work. And I was still, I think maybe even like getting chemo or kind of just had finished, but hadn't stopped work. And so we were kind of bouncing, the idea back and forth and figuring out how it would work. But yeah, it came from that. And we originally started with a different name. We were Operation Ohana. Ohana means family. And Amy's Hawaiian. And so the name really spoke to us. But as the organization, kind of progressed, we wanted to change the name, and in our process of thinking through what the name would be, we thought about like, well, what are people saying about the organization? Like, what's the feedback that we're getting in this first year and a half of our existence? Like, what are we hearing? And over
Mm.
and over and over again, people were like, you are a bright spot in this very, very difficult time. And
Mm.
so we just kept on coming back to that idea, and that's how we came up with Bright Spot Network.
Mm. I love it. I wrote Bright Spot down, and I was just thinking about how you were describing how hard it was to find help, and in connecting with Amy was literally a bright spot.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and we
It
say
was
that
just
to each other
like,
all the time. We'll like text each other and, be like, well, you're my bright spot, you know? So-
oh, no, it's great. It's like, and I love the fact that you all came together and each other and both said, we're going to do this together. I think that's so inspiring.
Yeah. It was definitely like a leap of faith for sure, but it was one of those things that, I don't know, I was just so sure that there was a space for this.
Mm.
The resource gap for young families just was, something obviously that like we experienced ourselves, but it felt so, the gap felt gaping. It just felt
Right.
so large. There's so many, and now, and I didn't know this, when I was diagnosed, it wasn't like, really relevant, honestly, to me, but cancer's on the rise for young people. It's on the rise for 19 to 50-year-olds. And those are folks who are, making families. And so what that
Mm.
means is that there's going to be more and more of these cancer patients who also are raising young kids and need that additional support, whether or not it is knowing that there's somebody else out there that is having a similar experience to you, or tools to talk to your kids about cancer. Or one of the things that we're really try to encourage is just connection between a parent and a child during this trauma. There's so much going on, and if we know that mental health is important for a cancer patient, that's good for their health outcomes.
Mm.
And if your identity is as a parent, then that connection between parent and child is going to be really, really key to your own just like success in your treatment. So
Mm.
we're all about those connections. That's good for everybody.
Mm. I love that. I love that. So tell me a little bit more about sort of the business, and how long have you been doing this for? And
Yeah, so this is our fifth year. We are extremely proud that last year we were able to serve over 2,000 families. So that is awesome. We do a whole bunch of different things under that kind of umbrella of supporting young families who are navigating a parent's cancer diagnosis while raising young kids. So we have support groups for parents, and those are groups for parents in active treatment, as well as parents with stage 4 cancer, recently bereaved folks. parents of color, as well as partners. And so those are all different support groups that we offer. We offer groups for kids, so kids also can get that peer support. We have a group that's more like a circle time that is attended with a parent, and that's like songs, books, kind of like mindfulness, coping, stuff like that, and a group for kids that are 5 to 10. And it's all of that, but like, just a little bit leveled up. We offer a whole slate of tools to help parents talk to kids about their cancer. So we offer free books for families. We have we call them quick guides, like how to talk to your kids. We also have a financial assistance grant. And that is for families that are navigating financial hardship, as well as a cancer diagnosis and raising a kid 0 to 6 years old, as well as educational resources like webinars and other web resources.
Wow. Wow. Kudos to you. That is just remarkable. 2,000 families.
Yeah.
In your fifth year. I mean, that's over, 180 families a month.
Yeah.
That's pretty. You guys are busy. Like that's
it's
amazing.
A lot.
You're providing a lot of bright spots to a lot of families.
Yeah,
pretty
I hope
amazing.
so. Yeah.
So Haley, I wanted to wrap up with a question that I like to ask to entrepreneurs. You're in your fifth year, you have a co-founder. It sounds like your business is really starting to grow, and you're providing a tremendous amount of love and value and support to families who are going through the toughest times of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Were there moments when, and I think about entrepreneurs who decide, for whatever reason, whether it's health related, whether they were laid off, they are just not fulfilled in the work, and they decide, I'm going to take the leap of faith and start something new. Were there moments when you and Amy said, this is not going to work? Or you just were like, the internet is going to catch up and people are going to be able to find access in whatever. And I guess I wonder if there was any moments where you just felt like, this isn't going to work. And how did you overcome that?
I mean, I would say at the beginning when we were kind of figuring out, like, is this, knowing in our hearts this was something that people needed, not being, kind of making the decision that we were the people that should be kind of providing the support or creating the support for folks. I think that was maybe an initial moment. And then there's other times that have just been like really hard. It's hard to run a nonprofit. Funding is up and down and it can be tight. And so for us, I think it's always about returning to that why. Why are we doing this? I think about sometimes when I'm feeling kind of like overwhelmed with the enormity of the work, which is enormous, both in terms of the scale of the trauma for people and the impact of a cancer diagnosis on people's lives, and how many people, 1 out of 5 newly diagnosed patients is a parent of a minor. Like that's a lot. That's a lot of people. I'll go back actually and like read testimonials or emails that I've gotten. Like I have a folder in my email that's just like, thank you, because that's the reason we're doing this. Not the gratitude isn't the reason we're doing the work, but the sentiments that are expressed in those emails, like, I really needed the support and you were there when I needed you. That is always going to get me out of bed in the morning, is like knowing that there's like a true impact on the other end of, the books we're sending in the mail, or people attending a support group, or kids having an opportunity to hear in a group for the first time that somebody else's mom has cancer, and just kind of being like, wait a second, I'm not the only one. Like those are always going to be moments that help me to move from point A to point B if I'm feeling stuck.
I love that. I think that's so relatable to so many people, is that why. And if you can touch one person and their family in the hardest of times, and you really you just have that feeling of the impact that you're having, that alone is the motivation to get out of bed. Because this world needs people like you and Amy to do the things that you're doing. And I know for certain your mom is looking down with love and happiness. And, you're warming a lot of hearts, and that's really cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, this work has definitely, it's been a surprise. It's not where I thought that I would end up. All of the the routes are not necessarily where I thought I would end up, but this is, similarly there. But I never look back and I'm like, oh, this isn't the right thing. Like I 100% know it is. And there is just so much work to be done and so many families that need the support. And we're so proud and humbled to be able to do the work.
That's great. So first of all, thank you so much. I just so appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. It's not easy, and it never gets easy, I'm sure, but it is so inspiring for people who may be in a similar situation, whether they're needing the support with how to have the conversation with their family or their friends or their kids. So thank you so much for sharing your story and just being real with your journey. And so how do people find Bright Spot?
So you can find us on the internet, brightspotnetwork.org, or follow us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. We would love to see you on any of those platforms. And feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me directly, Haley@brightspotnetwork.org.
Nice. Well, Haley, it's been such a pleasure. Again, I was so touched when you shared your story the first time, and just hearing really the journey. It's such a touching story. So thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so glad to be able to share the story, and really appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So thanks. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment and say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you like what you're hearing today, please click on the follow button and rate our show. Until next time, remember, if you're sitting there and you're stuck or just unsure of your career or future, and you really think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? And am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others around me? Until next time.